Students, in lesson 6.8, we will be working with patterns and fractions. Our central question that will guide our learning is, how can you use addition or subtraction to describe a pattern or create a sequence with fractions? So we're going to start at the top with the real world unlock the problem. Mr. Patrick wants to develop a new chili recipe for his restaurant. So that means that he wants to create something new that doesn't exist, boys and girls. Each batch he makes uses a different amount of chili powder. The first batch uses 3.5 ounces. The second batch uses 4 5/6 ounces. And the third uses 6 1/6 ounces. And the fourth uses 7.5 ounces. If this pattern continues, how much chili powder will he use in the sixth batch? So boys and girls, what we're going to do is we're going to build off what we know in the sequence to figure out the unknown quantities in the sequence. It says you can find the pattern in a sequence by comparing one term with the next term. So step 1, write the terms in a sequence as equivalent fractions with a common denominator. So right now, equivalent fractions with a common denominator, we have to look at all the fractions that we have here, and we see 2 and 6. So we would have to use the common denominator between 2 and 6. So if we wanted to make a list, our multiples of 2 and our multiples of 6, 2, 4, 6, 6 is the first multiple. So of those two, 6 would be our common multiple that we're going to use to rewrite the fractions that are equivalent to the original ones given the problem. Then examine the sequence and compare the consecutive terms to find the rule used to make the fraction or sequence. So what we do is we say we're going to rewrite the fractions. So if we look at our sequence, boys and girls, 3.5 and 7.5 need to be written as equivalent fractions with the denominator of 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 3.5 and we think to ourselves, well, what am I going to multiply 2 by to get 6? We know that would be 3, so we have to multiply the numerator 1 by 3. So our new fraction is 3 3/6. So now that we have that equivalent fraction, we can write that 3 3/6 in the first batch. And then we think to ourselves, if we add 1 2/6, we add our whole numbers. 3 plus 1 is 4. We add our numerators. 3 plus 2 is 5. So we have 4 5/6. So in our second batch, we would get 4 5/6. Now, boys and girls, because we're using a rule, we're going to continue to add the same amount. So we have 4 5/6 plus 1 2/6. So again, we add the whole numbers. 4 plus 1 is 5. And then we have 5 plus 2 is 7, 6. But now, boys and girls, we know that the denominator cannot be bigger than the numerator. So when we get past 6, 6, we know we actually acquire 1 additional. And so we have 6 and 1/6. So again, boys and girls, we applied the same rule from the previous problem, was to add 1 2/6. Remember, a rule does not change, it is constant. So we got in our new batch 6 and 1/6. And again, we're going to use the same term. 6 and 1/6 plus our rule, which was 1 2/6 to add that. So 6 plus 1 was 7, and 1 plus 2 is 3/6. Now, boys and girls, we're going to write 7 3/6. And remember, again, we added the rule 1 2/6 because the rule is constant. It doesn't change from step to step to step. So now in the next part, boys and girls, it says, write a rule that describes the pattern in the sequence. Is the sequence increasing or decreasing? And remember, boys and girls, increasing means it's going up and getting larger. Decreasing would be going down and we're subtracting. So what we can say is it is increasing because each term is 1 and 2/6, or we can say in simplest form, 1 and 1/3 greater than the term before. So it says the rule, boys and girls, here would be add 1 and 1/3. Notice the rule is in simplest form, and that's really important. So now it says step 3, extend the sequence to solve the problem. So here we have the first, second, third, fourth batches. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that 7 and a half, and we're going to rewrite it so that it has the correct term, which would be, oopsie, boys and girls, sorry about that. I made a little mistake there. We're going to think to ourselves, well, if 6 is the common denominator, what do we multiply 2 by to get 6? And we know that would be 3/3. So we have 7 and 3/6. So now this term, the equivalent form of it is 7 and 3/6. And we know the rule is to add 1 and 2/6. So we add our whole numbers. 7 plus 1 is 8. 3 plus 2 is 5/6. So the next term would be 8 and 5/6. Again, boys and girls, our rule is to add 1 and 2/6. So I'm going to add my rule 1 and 2/6 again. We get 8 plus 1 is 9. And then we have 5 plus 2 would be 7/6. Now, boys and girls, we know that once we get past 6/6, we're going to trade for 1 whole. So this 9 becomes a 10, and we have 1/6 left over. So Mr. Patrick will use 10 and 1/6 ounces of chili powder in his 6th batch. Example. It says find the unknown terms in the sequence. So what we're going to do, boys and girls, is as we go through these, we're going to analyze them to see if the sequence is increasing or decreasing. So first it says we have to look at our terms, and we see our denominators are 16, 4, and 8. And what we have to do now in this case, boys and girls, is we have to write our multiples of 16, 8, and a 4. So we think of our multiples of 4, we have 4, 8. Our multiples of 8 would be 8. Our first multiple of 16 would be 16. So now our second multiple would be 16, and our multiple over here would go 12, and then it would be 16. So remember, we see 16 is a common multiple, so 16 is going to be our least common denominator to rewrite those fractions. I'm going to abbreviate that right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the fractions so that they have the common denominators. So what we can do in our sequence, boys and girls, is we can write the fractions as equivalent fractions of the common denominator. 7/16 has that common denominator. 1 and 3/16 has that common denominator. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a wrong position there, boys and girls. It would be 1 and 3/16, boys and girls, and then we have 1 and 9/16. So the only fractions that we have to rewrite are the ones that don't have the denominator 16. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert them. So again, we write down our fraction of 1 and 3/4, and we think to ourselves, well, what can we multiply 4 by to get 16? We know we can multiply by 4/4. So then we get 12/16. Now we have 1 and 12/16, and it has the common denominator. Now we can go to our other fractions. We see we have 1 and 3/8, and we think to ourselves, well, what can we multiply 8 by to get 16? So we multiply 2 by the denominator, then we do 2 by the numerator, so we get the new fraction of 1 and 6/16. And now, boys and girls, we have one more that we have to change. We have 1/4, and we know that 1/4 can be multiplied by 4/4 to get 4/16. So right now, all of our fractions have the same denominators, and it's a lot easier to see if our sequence is increasing or decreasing. So now in step 2, it says write a rule describing the pattern of sequence. What operation can we use to describe the sequence that increases? Well, we know when we do an increase, we are getting larger, and that would be addition. And then, boys and girls, it says what operation can be used to describe a sequence that decreases? That would be subtraction. So boys and girls, if we look at our pattern, we start at the top, we have 1 whole and 12 sixteenths. Then we have 1 whole and 9 sixteenths, 1 whole and 6 sixteenths. We see that the sixteenths are decreasing as you go through. So we say that for sure, we know we're going to have a subtraction rule because our numbers are decreasing. So what we have to do is we have to figure out what they're decreasing by. So we've done this in previous chapters with whole numbers. Now we're going to apply that to fractions. So boys and girls, if you take any two terms in a sequence, like if we take these last two, they're probably the easiest. All we're going to do is we're going to subtract 7 sixteenths from 4 sixteenths. And if we do 7 minus 4, we would get 3 sixteenths. So we know that that's our rule. That's what we're decreasing by. That would apply to any other previous problems. So we're going to go here by our first unknown, which is 1 3/16 and 3/16 minus our rule, which was 3/16. So if we do 3/16 minus 3/16, we get 1. So that's our next term in the sequence. Now, boys and girls, what we're going to do is we're going to go to 1, and we're going to subtract that by our rule, which is 3/16. We know in this particular fraction that 16 sixteenths is equivalent to 1 whole. So we're going to rewrite and rename 1 as 6 sixteenths, and then we're going to subtract 3. So we have 6 16 minus 3, we would get 13 sixteenths. Now we're going to go again, boys and girls, and do 13 sixteenths subtracted by our rule again, 3 sixteenths, and we say 13 minus 3 is 10, so we would get the rule of 10 sixteenths. Now here, boys and girls, 10 sixteenths is not simplified, so what we're going to do is we're going to simplify 10 sixteenths. We know that 10 sixteenths has a common factor of 2, so we think to ourselves, what number times 2 equals 10? That would be 5, and what number times 2 equals 16 would be 8. So our next term in the sequence is 5/8. So these are kind of involved processes, so we want to make sure that we do understand them completely before we move on. And you might want to redo this problem a couple times in your notebook or practice writing your own sequence and making sure that your rule is the same and constant, either increasing or decreasing between all the numbers. Now, boys and girls, we're going to try one more where we're going to do a little bit work on writing our own rule. Step 1 here, boys and girls, we have to make sure that we know what our denominators are and that we figure out what the common denominator is for our numbers. So right off the back, I think to myself 3, 6, 9, 6, 12, 12, 12. So that we have to rewrite the fractions with the least common denominator of 12. So we're okay for the first one. The second one, 5, 6, has to be rewritten. So we take 5, 6, and we rewrite that having the denominator of 12, and we know that is times 2, so then we have 10 twelfths. So now, boys and girls, we have 10 twelfths as our new fraction. So we have 1 and 1/12, and the next one is 10 twelfths. And then we have the one that we don't know, and then we're going to go on to the next one. 1/3, we have to write that with a denominator of 12. Well, we know that that would be 4 over 4, and now we have 4 twelfths. Now 4 twelfths is the equivalent fraction for a half, and then we have 1/12. So boys and girls, we see that this rule is decreasing, so we're going to subtract. And what we did is we subtract 2 consecutive terms. So we subtracted 4 twelfths minus 1/12, we got 3 twelfths, and we know that that can be reduced to 1/4. And for this last one, boys and girls, we rewrote 1/4 to be 2/8, so it has a common denominator with the rule. And then we simply just added the rule, and the next term we got was 5/8, then 1, then 1 3/8.